Here we go. Let's do this.
We've got one life, one shot. Who do you want to be? What do you want to do? Addicted to Betterment, a podcast to inspire us to keep going, to try something new, to dream, to think big, bigger, to overcome. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go.
Welcome back to Addicted to Betterment. I know that you will find today's show rich with content, and hopefully it impacts you the way that today's guest has impacted and inspired me. So here at Addicted to Betterment, we constantly talk about our practice, our core practice, the life wheel. And Nikki and I have an exercise that we do with ourselves, with groups, where we go through our life wheel and we identify where we're at currently. Sometimes it's a 2, sometimes it's a 5, and sometimes it's an 8 or 9 or 10. But we actually grade ourselves on a 1 to a 10. And we do that, and it's a meaningful time that we do, usually I'll call it quarterly, with kind of an end of year, very lengthy, extensive version of that. But these conversations with others and groups are often so fulfilling when we help others walk through this practice. So imagine my excitement and passion when I met today's guest, who his mission in life is to help people live their 10. And I know that his story has impacted me a lot, and his tools and ideas to help people live their 10 is awesome. And I'm excited and grateful to have today's guest on the show. Welcome, Cory Chadwick, to Addicted to Betterment. Man, it's great to have you on here today.
David, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Man, I tell you what, I mean, I just got to dive right in. I'm not much one for fluff and BS. I got to know the first thing that's on my mind. What is it that makes you so passionate about helping people, we'll call it live their 10? But before you answer that, help me define what do you mean when you say live your 10? What does that mean?
Yeah, I think in its kind of simplest explanation, it's if you think about your life on a scale from 1 to 10, and you just kind of touched on this. 1 on that scale is you showing up at your worst. You're living your worst life. 10 on that scale is you showing up at your best. You're living your best life. You're doing it on your terms. I want to be clear. 10 is not perfect. There is no such thing as like a perfect life. We're not robots. We're human beings. We're going to have ups and downs and ebbs and flows no matter where we are on that scale. But on that scale from 1 to 10, where do you want to be? How do you want to be showing up? How do you want to be living your life? It doesn't sound to me like you're too much into that 7 kind of idea, right? You want to live your 10. So do I. And that's kind of on a really high level what living your 10 is.
You know, Cory, I know the first conversation you and I had went really deep, and the reality is, yes, I try to live a 10 all the time. There's often that I must confess, I wake up and I think, man, in this area right now, I'm at a 5, and that never feels good. And it's just the reality. And thankfully I have a lot of people in my life that help me recognize that and pursue that level 10. So what is it, man? What is it that makes you so passionate? Help me understand why you would change your whole life, change your business and everything that you do to help others live their 10.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I changed my whole life. I think this was just like the natural evolution of my life. Living your 10 is not some destination. It's not like you get there and you're done, as we know that with any sort of personal growth, leadership development, mental fitness like we do. It's just this constant pursuit of betterment, right? How can I just be a little bit better today than I am tomorrow? And as you point yourself in the direction of 10, and that's very much how we think about it, you point yourself in a direction and you move in that direction. And every day you're just trying to take another little step in that direction, knowing that all those little steps, all those little micro improvements, those tiny adjustments you make, they all add up and they add up and they add up. And so that's just all I did. Was I never looked at it as I need to make this big giant change in my life. Certainly there are times in your life where you've got those decisions that you can tell are defining decisions. You know, what direction do I take my business in? Who do I want to marry? Like these life decisions. And certainly we want to make those decisions the best way we can. But even day to day, those moment to moment decisions, like those are the ones, if we can get better and better at making those, we keep pointing ourselves in the direction of 10. So I don't feel at all like I kind of changed anything about my life on a macro level. I just kept staying on course, and then this is where it led me to.
I love the reminder that it's not a massive shift, that you didn't just wake up one day and say, oh man, I'm going north, I'm turning around, I'm going completely south. It's one of my favorite books is Atomic Habits. And one of the core principles is 1% better. And that's what you're talking about. It's because, hey, I want to get better. I'm a 6 right now, and I really want to live up more to 9, trying to pursue that 10, and just making these small incremental changes, which is much easier for us humans because often the big shift, the massive adjustment or change, it's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable. We see that all the time.
Right. And then therefore you end up back at the 4 or worse than you were because you tried to do something that just didn't work. And then you get discouraged. And thank you for teeing that up that way. What is it, man? What is it that got you so fired up and passionate about trying to help others live a 10?
It started by, I was fired up about helping myself live my own 10. At the start of my journey, I wasn't thinking about other people. I was thinking about myself and my own life. I went through some tough times growing up. I mean, we all have our adversity in life. I remember the first day that it dawned on me that life wasn't maybe all sunshine and rainbows all the time was the first time my parents split up. I remember that conversation. I was like, whoa, like what's going on here? When I was 16 years old, I contracted this freak rare brain virus, just a random thing. It took doctors 7 months just to diagnose it. So that was 7 months of no answers, really. Just, am I going to live? Am I going to die? Like, we didn't know. So it took 7 months just to diagnose that. Fortunately, once they did diagnose it, that started, my recovery, and that was great, but scary time. My passion about being mentally healthy and fit, and this is such an integral part of my journey and what we do with people in the mental gym, helping people be healthy and fit. It started with my mom. My mom suffered from mental illness, and that became really evident in my teenage years. People didn't talk about mental health or mental illness then. It was very much stigmatized. And for some reason, there still is some stigma to it, which I think this is like ridiculous. But we're making progress. The conversation is out there, and more people are talking about it and recognizing how important that is. So it's a really wonderful thing, and we need to keep moving in that direction. At the time, though, my mom was really struggling, even though she really tried to hide it from us. Being a protective mom, and just, people are very good at projecting an image that we want other people to see. Like, oh, I've got it together. Life's good. I'm fine. And post about it on Instagram and play that game that nobody wins. It was clear that mom was struggling. And I just had no idea how much she was struggling or how much pain she was in until one day I get a phone call telling me that she tried to take her life. And that really rocked me. You just have no idea that it's that bad, or that someone's in that much pain. And the thought that, like, to her, that's the only way out of the situation, that really changed my perspective on a lot of things. And then she tried again, and then one day she went through with it. I remember that phone call as clear as anything in my life. And there's no handbook for that, right? There's no prepping you in life for that. We're all trying to navigate life the best way we can and figure it out the best way we can and deal with the ups and downs and adversity the best way we can. And I did the best I could. One of the things that became so very clear to me, and this is what really started this whole journey for me, I was just kind of reflecting on everything that was going on, and I started seeing life on a scale from 1 to 10. That life exists on this scale from 1 to 10. I don't think I would have recognized that had I not been now in a low place myself, and seeing my mom in such a really low place, that I felt like I was at a 2 and mom must have been at a 1 or less than a 1. But that gave me so much perspective. It's kind of like you need that contrast sometimes to gain perspective on things. And I was low on that scale. And so I started looking up at that scale. And I saw this scale from 1 to 10. I'd never thought about it like this before. And as soon as I started thinking about it that way, I kind of felt like, well, this is the worst it can get. But then if there's a worse, there must be a best, right? Like, that just makes sense. If there's a worse, there has to be a best. So if this is the worst it can get, what's the best it can get? What's on the other end of that scale? And that was so very clearly a 10 to me. And so as soon as I recognized that, I also recognized that where you are on that scale and how you live your life, it's up to you. Like, this is a decision that you make. And yes, there are exceptions, sure, but I don't like to focus on the exceptions to the rule. I like to focus on the rule. It's your decision. You choose this. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, okay, so clearly I don't want to be at this 2. Do I want to be at like a 6? Because then I'm avoiding the 2, and it's right in the middle, and that's fine. I'm like, well, that's not exciting to me. I'm not going to get up in the morning inspired and pumped up because I'm going to go live my 6. was like, what about 7 or 8? Like, that's pretty good. And it was just so clear to me that like, if I can choose anything I want, why would I choose a 6, 7, or even an 8 when I can choose my 10? And just put a stamp on it and said, I'm going to live my 10. And that's what got everything going. I didn't know much at the time. I didn't even know what that meant. But now it was up to me to find out.
Cory, I sorry, man. I have goosebumps. Several thoughts from what you just said. One, you didn't make excuses and take the easy path. And maybe you did, actually. Maybe there was a period of time where you just, and you had every right to. Obviously, one of the hardest things anyone could ever go to. But recognizing that there is a 10, and I don't want to wake up and aspire to be a 6. I don't want to settle for that. In my mind, that's what I heard you say was, man, I only got this one shot. I don't want to settle and pursue and be okay with living a 6. May not always be that 10, but I'm always going to be chasing it as hard as I can. And wow, thank you so much for sharing that. Friends, Cory sharing his story. It's wow, so impactful. One of the things that I want to say, just listening to you talk, is I thought, how many people are out there doing what your mom did and pretending or trying to hide the struggle, and I think we're all guilty of that sometimes. And my encouragement to you today, if you're listening to this, is hear Cory's story and hear the passion in his voice. And if you're like what I've done before and just try to pretend like you're having it together or pretend like you're not struggling, don't do that. Seek help, get help, find people who will help you with that, because that's the number one thing that I was just feeling as you were talking, as so many people, and I'm guilty of this myself, because, you got to act like you have together. You have to be strong for the people around you. And as you just said, just trying to be the strong mom. And man, friends, if you're feeling that way today, my plea, my encouragement to you is seek help and get the help that you need, because we all need it at times. So thank you for sharing that.
You said like, we're all trying to pretend we have it all figured out and we have all the answers. I'm a big believer that none of us have it figured out. We're all trying our best to figure it out. We're trying to navigate life the best way we can, make the best decisions we can. We're doing the best we can. The more equipped we are to do that, the better we're going to be. And the better our lives are going to be, the more we're going to be living our 10s. But every one of us is like kind of messed up a little bit, at least, right? Like everyone's got something going on. And then certainly some people are struggling more and have more things. But I mentioned like the Instagram life. It's this thing's killing us. It's just this, like, this is what it looks like. And this is this level I need to show up at and maintain. And everyone else is living this amazing life. No, they're not. They're not. They're playing the same game you are. They're pretending that they are. And because they got to keep up and they got to look good. So I'm not a fan of that at all. And look, I've seen like all over the scale. I've seen people. It was actually both my parents. It's my mom suffered from her mental illness. My father had his struggles with addiction, and so this is why mental health. So you asked like why living your 10 became such an important thing for me. There were really two parts to this. One was, do you remember that feeling? Maybe, I don't know if you remember it, but I think so many of us can relate to this. You're young, however young you are, maybe like a teenager, or maybe younger than that, but you have this feeling like you've got all this potential, but you don't know what that means, and you don't know what to do with it, and you don't know what direction to point yourself in, and you're like, who can I trust to show me the way? Like, you don't have any of those answers, maybe, unless you might happen to be excelling academically or in sports, because those are very clear avenues for that. But for a lot of like the rest of us, like I was a good student. I wasn't the best student. I was a good athlete. I wasn't the best athlete. Like, it was okay. So what's my thing? I didn't know, but you have this feeling like you have potential, your personal potential. You want to realize it, but you don't know how. So that became a very important theme in my life. When my mom was going through her stuff, and when my mom passed away, and then when my dad with his addiction issues, and if anybody knows anybody who has somebody close to them with addiction issues, it's not a positive thing in life. It can be a really, really challenging, difficult thing, and addiction does terrible things to people. And I was afraid really to turn out like either one of my parents. I was terrified, actually. I remember when my mom passed away, my thought is, well, what if this is genetic? What if her situation is genetic? Same with my dad. What if there's a genetic component to this too? And these are the two people who had clearly the most influence on my life, right? They're the ones who raised me and shaped me, and I learned from. And I will say, entirely grateful for what wonderful parents they both were. They both had their own issues, but man, were they great parents. And they never put their own issues in front of us, even with their issues with each other. And my parents were together and apart and together and apart and together and apart, but they never said a bad thing about each other in front of us. They never put us in the middle, like none of that. So they were really wonderful in that way. But still, I was terrified to turn out like either one of them. And so here's this elephant in the room that I want to be this best version of myself. I want to realize my personal potential for myself, for other people. But I got this big elephant in the room that I gotta deal with this thing. And so it became so clear to me that we all have mental health, every single one of us, just like we all have physical health. And I had some options here. I could cross my fingers and just hope everything worked out and I would somehow be okay. And like, that is not a strategy. I could do what unfortunately too many people do, is wait until they're struggling and then reach out for help and then try to seek support. And it's like, why are we waiting? Because like once you're on that end of the scale, it's a lot harder to move yourself back up, right? Like it's not like it happened overnight. This happened gradually and kept building and building and building. And I didn't want to live that way anyway. The third option was to be proactive instead of reactive, be proactive with my mental health and get mentally healthy and fit. And the same way we're looking at that best life, worst life scale from 1 to 10, how mentally healthy and fit can I get? And recognizing that my quest and my journey of trying to be my best self and working to be my best self was so directly intertwined with my level of mental health and fitness. Those two things became one. They became the same thing and really eventually became the foundation for everything that we do in the mental gym. Was we're getting mentally healthy and fit, and we're doing that by living our tens. These two things work so hand in hand. But it's really that set me on my journey. That's what got me thinking differently and making decisions differently. And like we said before, it was never about making some big giant change in my life. I pointed myself in a direction and I started moving in that direction. And I just learned what it took to keep me moving in that direction. And it was like I just kept finding another piece of the puzzle and connecting another piece of the puzzle, always just making these tiny little shifts in how I thought, how I made decisions and behaved. And again, all of those little adjustments, all those tiny improvements, they add up and they add up and they add up. They really, really do.
Man, being proactive, so good. That is so good. I'm going to have to pause and get at some more pages here. I'm taking so many notes. This is such good stuff. Cory, as you're talking, I'm curious, why is it that people miss out on living their 10? What's behind so many of people around me? And I know you have them as well. People that seem like it's okay and they've accepted living at a 5 or a 6 or below. But why is that? Why is it people miss out on it?
It's a great question, and there's a number of answers to it, but let's start with the one you just said, that most people are living their 5 or 6. If you think of a bell curve, that thing that we learned in elementary school, that bell curve, that big meaty part of the bell curve is people living their 5 and 6. The huge majority of people are living their 5 or 6, which means odds are that most people who have influenced us and shaped us and people that our teachers, our parents, our friends, people that we work with, they're most likely living a 5 or 6 too. So we're surrounded by 5 and 6. And then what we do, even subconsciously, is we replicate other people's patterns and habits, how they think, how they make decisions, behave. And so we learn to think, make decisions, and behave like a 5 or 6 version of ourselves too. And because it's quite simple, how we think dictates how we make our decisions dictates how we act and behave, and that's what leads to our results. So if you're thinking and making decisions like a 6, you're going to live a 6 life. It's really as simple as that. So that's one of them. Another one is, and you kind of mentioned it before, like people want it all at once. We have no patience. They're like, if I can't have it all now, I'm not interested. Well, you're not going to live your 10 then. It's just not going to happen that way. Another thing is people have no idea what actually matters to them in life. Like when I started living my 10 and I mentioned I didn't know what I was doing when I started, right? I put my stamp on it. I put my flag in the ground. I was like, now what? Like, what does that even mean to me? And it became so very clear to me watching my mom that she was so unhappy that I asked myself, like, is there anything in life that matters more than being happy? Or is that the most important thing? And it became very clear to me that living a truly happy and fulfilling life, and those are two different things, happiness and fulfillment, but living that truly happy and fulfilling life was the most important thing. And that really everything that we do in our lives, everything that we work for, prioritize, put our time and energy and attention into, is all because we want to be happy and we want to feel fulfilled. That's why we do these things. And so rather than just doing those things and crossing our fingers and hoping that it leads to that, why don't we just start with saying, this is my North Star. This is my 10. How do I make sure I'm pointing myself in that direction? And you find that even just that shift really changes your thought on that. And then you got to ask yourself, like, how happy and fulfilled do I want to be? Because if you answer that with a 7, then you're going to live your 7. But if you answer that with a 10, then you learn to think and make decisions and behave consistently with that 10. I mean, those are just some of the reasons that people get stuck. Another one that I think is hugely important is that we don't have the structure to do it, right? And so we, I mean, look, obviously you and I both love podcasts and reading books and things like that. But if we're doing things kind of, a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit here, a little bit there, think about exercising that way. Like, imagine exercising like once or twice and then saying, I'm all done, I'm healthy, right? It doesn't work for our bodies and it doesn't work for our minds. So there's a reason that, say, people go to a gym and would go to like a group exercise class, because with the guidance, with the consistency, with the accountability, and with the community, we grow and grow and grow so much faster. And so I'm a big believer that if we don't have the consistency, if we don't have the structure and the guidance and the support, if we don't have the accountability, and if we don't have that community of people to do it with, it just makes it a whole lot harder to live your 10. So yeah, there's a number of reasons.
That's it's so interesting and impactful for me, using the analogy of physical fitness in correlation with mental fitness. And when you start seeing it the same of just the daily things. And so I love the gym and I love going to the gym. I love taking care of my physical body. And, I know the foundational principles that make up taking care of my physical body. I know what those are. Using that analogy, what is the foundational principles of the mental fitness? What are the things that you would tell our friends that, hey, as you're, thinking through getting mentally fit, getting, going after that 10, because as you said, they're hand in hand. You can't, they're not, it's impossible to separate the two. So understanding that, what's some core foundational principles that's necessary to start pursuing that?
Yeah, great question. So I like what you said there about physical fitness, and I'll kind of use that as a starting point here. I think we all know that people like to set physical fitness goals, especially on January 1st of every year, right? It's New Year's. Everybody's done that, right? January 1st comes along and you're like, okay, I'm going to start working out 5 days a week, 2 hours a day, and I'm going to cut out all sugar out of my diet, and I'm going to read a book every week. And it's like, it's the new me. And it's like, again, we know that this stuff doesn't stick. It's just...
Cory, have you been reading my life wheel goals is this what you're quoting right now?
People are so much more alike than we realize. We have so much in common. Again, we're trying to figure out life. We're trying to make the best decisions we can. We have our differences, and what's different about us and what's unique is really wonderful and has the potential to be a really, really wonderful thing. But we also have so much in common. And on that path that we're walking, on that journey, we encounter so many of the same challenges. We want a lot of the same things. We find a lot of the same challenges, a lot of the same things that we're trying to figure out. But the problem is we don't talk about that with anybody, right? We talk about fluff level stuff, and we have surface level conversations instead of just being real with each other and losing the filter and saying like, hey, you know what? I tried this thing and it was hard and I didn't figure it out. It's like, great. Someone else is like, yeah, me too. Oh man, you understand me. I understand you. I got to tell you, when we do this with teams, mental gym with teams and organizations, the way that they connect, like genuinely connect, not just as coworkers or colleagues, but as human beings, the amount of mutual respect they gain for each other, the amount of trust they build in the team is really nothing short of phenomenal. And the biggest reason is we're pointing ourselves in a direction together. We're moving this direction together. We're being real and honest with each other. It's a super positive space. It's also a super safe space. And people just crave real. We don't get real. So when you say, am I reading your diary or am I looking at your notes? You, me, so many of us, like we have all this in common. So let's stop pretending that we don't, right? We have so much of this in common. But what we do is we pick these goals, we set these goals, and I get why, right? We're inspired. We have this vision of ourselves we want to be. We say, hey, if I'm going to live my best life as the best version of myself, I got to be physically fit. My diet's got to be better. I got to be smarter, right? So I want to read more. We do these things and it's great. But again, we're not setting ourselves up to succeed. We're actually setting ourselves up to fail there by doing it that way. So what we got to do is build the habits, the mental tools, the skills, the habits, the mindset we need to keep it going and make it sustainable and keep that motivation and keep growing. I have no interest in seeing somebody bust their ass for 2 weeks and peak and then fizzle out, right? I want to set you up for your entire life here, at home, at work, who you are, how you show up. And so in doing that, we got to get away from that all here, like I need it here, I need it now, quick fix mentality. It never works. It's a process, it's a system, it's a lifestyle. If you think about it like a lifestyle, it changes everything. So that's one of those foundational principles that we need. So one, you got to make a decision. Are you going to live your 10 or are you not going to live your 10? You just got to decide, right? You can decide right here, right now. You don't need to know anything more than that. You don't need a beautifully painted picture of what that looks like. You don't need specific goals. You don't need any of that. You just need to make a decision, scale of 1 to 10. I want to live my 10. You have to start there. Then you can start asking yourself, what does that mean to me? What's most important to me? Why does that matter? Again, I believe it all comes back to being happy and feeling fulfilled. We start there. Now, you mentioned something earlier that I think is so important, and this is really such a foundational principle of our work and living your 10. And this became so clear to me once I had that light bulb go off about that scale from 1 to 10 and choosing to live my 10 and what it means to me. Nobody's handing that to you. Nobody's doing it for you. If you want to live your 10, you got to own it. You got to take full responsibility for it. You got to take responsibility for who you are and how you show up and how you think and how you make your decisions and how you behave. And it's not about who you were before. I don't care about who you were before. And I almost don't even care that much about who you are today. I just care about who you're going to be tomorrow and who you're becoming and the direction you're pointing yourself in, right? So let's not beat ourselves up for past decisions or things that we did or didn't do right. Again, just like lose all of that. Sunk costs. First lesson in business school, right? So ignore sunk costs. Just point ourselves in that direction. So choose your 10, number one. Understand on a very high level what that means to you. Take ownership for it, full ownership for it. Now you can start asking yourself about exercise. Now you can start asking yourself about diet or reading or any change you want to make in your life, but not before then.
Friends, as you're listening to this, I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to ask you to just push pause on this podcast. And I need you to ask yourself, look in the mirror if you can. Cory, you just said it. You have to make a decision. You got to ask yourself, am I going to live a 10? Yes or no? It's not a maybe, kind of. There is no maybe or kind of. Am I going to go after my 10? Yes or no? And when you asked that just now, it like connected with my soul, asking yourself that direct of a question and making yourself answer the question, am I going to do it? Yes or no? The profound clarity in that just resonated with me. So I love the way you said that. So someone has asked themselves, yes, I want the 10. First of all, if you just did that based on this, man, hats off to you. Congratulations. And I love what you said, take action. So help me understand real quick, where do you see most often people get hung up? They say, man, I want to go after my 10. And then they face obstacles, stumbling blocks, and things that kind of keep them back from going after. What do you usually see that is?
So we, growing up in North America, like many of us have, this kind of Western world, we define success a certain way. And so people think living their 10, I can't tell you how many people, when they get introduced to this concept, start talking about the big yacht or life on the beach. They're like, I can't just quit my job and live on the beach. It's like, would that actually be your 10? I mean, maybe it would be, but like, I have a feeling it's not. It might be great for a couple of weeks or for a month, but like, is that what you want to be doing for your whole life? How important? I was just giving a talk the other day. Some person, the yacht thing again, it comes up a lot. And I was like, well, how important is that yacht to you? And she's like, oh, well, I actually don't really care about a yacht. And I'm like, then why is this a part of this conversation? Like, that's somebody else's 10. But we've learned so much that this small group of people who have the yachts and who live that sort of life, they're living their 10s. Are they? I don't know. We don't know. On Instagram, it looks like they are. On TikTok or Facebook, whatever it is. But are they happy? Do they feel fulfilled? I don't know. Some of them, yes. Some of them, no. So we're so caught up in this idea of living your 10 is this very traditional, typical idea of success. What we need to do is understand that your 10 is your 10. It's not somebody else's 10. Comparing yourself to somebody else here isn't going to help, other than who you were yesterday and who you want to be tomorrow. By all means, then compare all day. And you've got to define success for yourself, right? Like, to me, it became so clear about happiness and fulfillment that there's kind of 3 pillars to that, if you will. We call them the 3 W's: who, why, and with. So we've talked a lot about who do you want to be? How do you want to show up? Who could you be? Who's that best version of yourself? And the best version of me today is different from the best version of me 10 years ago. And it's going to be different from the best version of myself 10 years from now, or even 10 days from now, right? But it's that constant pursuit of betterment, of being a better version of myself. That why piece of it is, why are you doing it? Like, why does it matter to you? Why is it important to you? What's being impacted by you showing up at your best? Who's being impacted? Is it your team at work? Is it your family? Is it your community? I coach my kids' hockey teams, right? Like, they're all impacted by it. And what we don't realize sometimes, especially with leaders and people with any sort of influence, is that we're all creating a ripple effect. Like, everybody creates a ripple effect. Everyone around you is impacted by this. So if you're showing up as a 5 or a 6, then you're creating a 5 or a 6 ripple effect, which means the people around you, like your team at work, are much more likely to show up as 6 versions of themselves. And then they'll pass that on to people in their ripple too. Whereas if you're showing up as a 10, that's the ripple effect you create. That's how people show up. That's the measure, the bar that you set, right? And so it's not just you, it's all of these people. So that why, it's not like a singular life's purpose. It could be, for some people who have it. For other people, that quest for that singular life's purpose just gives them more stress and anxiety than it's worth. So I wouldn't sweat that. It's just, who can you be and how can you show up at your best, and why does that matter? And then with is who you're doing it with, right? Who are those people in your life? Who are the most important people in your life? Who you care about the most, who you like and who you love? How can you show up at your best for them? How can you create the best, the most meaningful relationships you can with them? Life is so much better when you're doing it with other people who are just awesome in your life. And those who, why, and with, they're not isolated concepts, as I'm sure you can hear. They're very much intertwined with each other. But we haven't learned to focus on our who or why or with. We've learned to focus on things like, how much money can I make? What's that job title I can have? And what kind of car can I drive? And I want to be very clear. I am not like anti-money, anti-career. I love seeing people that we work with thrive in their careers. I really do. They make more money. They get promoted faster. Like, these things happen because of who they are and how they're showing up. I love that stuff. But if that's how we're defining success in life, well, this is why so many people aren't happy and don't feel fulfilled, right? So focus on the 3 W's instead. You're gold.
So break down with me the habits that you described. So you talked about, we used the analogy of the physical fitness. And you just shared where you feel people get hung up. So in order to not get hung up, I'm imagining that there are things that you can put in place, habits, mindsets, tools to go after that. What are some of those things?
Yeah, some of them are super simple. So I know a lot of the time when people think about habits, they think about physical habits, and physical habits are incredibly important, right? Like, I meditate every single morning. I make sure I exercise, at least Monday to Friday morning. I make sure I exercise. We have habits in how we eat and how we sleep. And like, I'm talking a lot about self-care here, but this is, these are important habits too. But the habits that are the most important here, the ones that build the physical habits, are the mental habits. Mental habits build physical habits. You can't do it the other way around. And so what are the mental habits that we want to build? So a few really simple ones. And again, think of a habit as anything that you do repeatedly, right? The more you do it, it's like building a muscle. The more you do it, the better you get, the stronger you get. So it takes repetition, right? It takes practice. People often think like, give me some tools. And it's like, I can give you the tools, but now you've got to develop the skills in using the tools. Yeah, I can give you a hockey stick. It doesn't make you a great hockey player, right? You have to practice being a hockey player. Anybody who's ever tried golf understands that just because you have a set of golf clubs doesn't mean you're a great golfer, right? And so this is something we really need to understand. So what are these key habits that really anybody can start developing on their own? 1, 10 or not 10. Ask yourself that question as often as you can throughout your day. It does not just apply to these big high-level decisions in your life. It applies to things throughout your day. So here's an example. We were talking about food, snacking. I don't know. Do you like to snack?
I love to snack, Cory.
Yeah. It's like, I'm hungry. I can't wait 3 meals a day. I got to eat in between. So here's the thing. You're sitting on your couch. You're like, it's like, I don't know, an hour till dinner time. I'm not going to wait. I need a snack. What are you going to eat? Cool. You're going to have a snack. Now, what are you going to snack on? Very quickly, ask yourself 10 or not 10. What would a 10 version of me do here? The 10 version of me, what are they going to snack on? You're looking, like, if you're like me, I go to the fridge, I open the fridge, I look and I'm like, what's here? What are my options? I open the cupboard, I'm like, what's in the cupboard, right? Rarely do I get off the couch knowing exactly what I want to eat. So we all do this, and then we decide. And then what we do is we look at the option that's like, ooh, you know what? That like, I want the sweet thing. I want the chocolate. I want the candy. I want the chips. If you're a salty person instead of a sweet person, right? Maybe you're both. But this is such a small, simple thing that any of us can do. Like just alter your snacking habits to start going for that fruit, those vegetables, those nuts. Still, like forget about your 3 big meals of the day or whatever you're doing, right? Just this small little change we can make, 10 or not 10. Now, that being said, if you're craving, like really craving that chocolate one day, like go ahead and eat the chocolate. Like 10 is not about, again, it's not about perfect. It's much more about balance, like optimal balance in as many things as we can. Again, exercise. If you don't have time to, I don't have time to exercise 3 hours a day, 4 hours a day, right? But also not exercising isn't an option. So where's my balance? I don't just eat kale all day, every day. It's like, where's my balance? You know, sometimes we want to order a pizza on the weekend. Great. We're going to do that. We're not going to sweat it either. I'm not going to do that every day, right? It's like, what's your normal? My normal is to eat healthy. The exception is to eat unhealthy, but it's not like this is part of my 10. It's that balance. It's what's sustainable for you. That's the most important thing. What can you sustain? So I love that shift, just 10 or not 10. You can apply it to any decision you make throughout the day, every day. It doesn't mean that you're going to make every decision 10 instead of not 10. Don't freak out if you're like, oh man, I'm not acing this thing. If you can make 3 better decisions today than yesterday, and we make thousands of decisions a day, so you got lots of opportunity to do this. If you can make 3 better decisions today, like, what is that, 1,700 better, no, what's the math now? Call it 1,000 better decisions in a year, right? Like that's what you're doing. You're making 1,000 better decisions. 1,000 better decisions can, like, think about it like votes. 1,000 votes can sway an election, right? Like 1,000 better decisions in a year can change your life. So that's a huge mental habit that anybody can practice. Also, similarly, who do I want to be? We're talking about that who in the 3 W's. I ask myself that question all the time. Who do I want to be in whatever situation I'm in? Who do I want to be right now? How do I want to show up right now? And then why? Why does it matter? So these are such simple questions that we can ask ourselves, but the more that we ask them and ask them and ask them, not only is it phenomenal for getting mentally fit, because we're taking control of our mind, we're strengthening how we think and make decisions at a really high level here, but we're pushing ourselves more and more in the direction of our 10. And so these are these mental habits. Just keep building those habits and the rest of it will start to take care of itself.
Cory, if I take anything away from this, it's asking myself, what is the 10 version of me going to do right now? I'm very guilty. It's interesting because that analogy that you gave of getting up and going to the refrigerator, and this is a regular joke in our house. You know, I'll go into the refrigerator and I open it up and I'm like, all I see is empty shelves. It's all I see. I'm just like, I don't see anything in here to snack on. I don't see anything to eat. And then I'll mention it, you know, like I end up grabbing something that was probably not the 10, maybe more like the 2 or 3 level, you know, and I'll mention like, man, we don't have any food in there. And it just shocks my wife every time. She's like, oh my gosh, did you not see all this? And I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't even see that. So great tip on that for me. And I love the question of who do I want to be? Who do I want to be today? And, you know, showing up intentionally in situations or decisions with that in mind. It's a great tip. So Cory, this is good. If you were going to inspire our friends, our listeners to one thing, to one action to move toward the 10 today, what would it be?
I think we just talked about it. I think, you know, choose 10 or not 10. Like if you can do it right now on the spot, because I encourage you, don't overthink this. Go with your gut, 10 or not 10. Where people get run to challenges there, they think like, okay, but how do I do that? And I don't have it all figured out and I don't have all the goals. Like, yeah, you're overthinking this. Just choose 10 or not 10. And once you choose that, so that's, if you're going to take any action, do that. And then the second action I would take right now is owning it. So recognize that you've got to own it. And you can do that really simply throughout your day. Again, practice this skill, build this habit. Just start recognizing where you're not owning something, where you're making an excuse or blaming somebody or pointing your finger at someone instead of just saying, this is on me. And again, practice.
Dang, man, I can't imagine that there's people. I mean, I'm sitting here right now. I've already talked to you. We connect and talk, and I'm thinking, how can I help? How can I get Cory to help me pursue this 10? I can't imagine that there's not other people down thinking like that. I can't imagine that there's not leaders thinking, man, how can he help my team go after a 10? How can he help me go after a 10? help me understand what you do. The mental gym, just give me a quick description, what it is that you do at the mental gym. How do you work with people? What does that look like?
Sure. And by the way, but we're actually right in the middle of like a brand freshen up. So when people hear this, some of the things I'm about to say might be a little bit different, including the name, but you'll still be able to find us. So just like we have exercise for our bodies, the mental gym is for your mind. It is not therapy. It's a place to get mentally healthy and fit. So we're not talking about reactive care at all. This is entirely proactive. It's helping people who strive to be their best selves. We're giving them a place to do that. So we're combining a very proactive approach to mental health, mental fitness. We're combining it with personal and leadership development. And because of the format that we do it in this group format, it's like a group exercise class. So think of it like going to a CrossFit class or a spin class or boot camp class, except we're not making you sweat. We're challenging you to think and think differently. And what we're doing each workout is we're just focusing on, one little shift in how you think and make decisions. But again, we're doing that in such an awesome, safe, positive, inclusive space. One of the challenges that people face is they're trying to grow up, but they've got this filter in the way, like of how they're trying to show up and how they're trying to look to other people. And when we can just drop that, we grow so much faster. And so we do that. And so the experience in the gym, it's like people love the workouts and they love how it changes their lives. And both are important. So it's fun, it's engaging for people, especially for people who are growth oriented, who are ambitious, who care about who they are and how they show up. You mentioned leaders, right? Like that's kind of the focus of who we're going to work with here. Leaders, emerging leaders, high potential people who really prioritize their mental health and well-being, who prioritize their personal growth and their leadership development, and who want structure and accountability and guidance and a supportive community to do that with. So that's what we do in the gym. It's 1 hour once a week. It's not like you got to go to the gym, 4 or 5 times a week. It's just 1 hour once a week. It's that break, that necessary break from all the pressures and responsibilities and work and home and everyday life and the noise. And it's just that 1 hour to focus on yourself and your well-being and your growth. And that's how we work with teams. We set up workout programs for them. We take them through those workout programs. Again, just really engaging, fun, just a really great way to work on yourself and grow with consistency, with guidance, with support, with accountability. It's awesome.
Cory, I got to tell you, my first impression, our very first conversation, you're the real deal, man. You are the real deal. I remember how I got introduced to you. My wife met you through some work you guys did together, and
we did a podcast together.
That's right. What you do is big impact, and how you show up, it's so legit. It inspires me, man. I can't help but ask, what's the next biggest thing? What is your next biggest impact goal for Cory Chadwick in the mental gym?
I think like a lot of people who want to impact people and change lives, you want that ripple effect to be as big as it can be. And so I want to bring the mental gym to the world. I want as many people who see themselves in what we do to have the opportunity to show up at their best, to live their tens, to be mentally fit. And so as we grow, as we get to work with more teams and more organizations and more people, and we're looking towards offering and partnering with more communities, which is something I'm really excited about too. This is something that's starting to happen now, is more communities who are saying, hey, this is such a great fit for the members of our community. And we're starting to like co-brand the mental gym experience with their brand, which is really exciting. And just to keep doing that, to grow out a roster of just incredible rock star trainers who are so committed to this and living their best lives and helping other people do the same, to create a bigger and bigger ripple effect, help 1 million people get mentally healthy and fit and live their tens. The world's going to be a much better place.
Guys, this is challenging and inspirational at the same time. And just kind of a recap here. If you're trying to posture, pretend, or as Cory said earlier, be strong for the people around you, man, don't do that. Seek help. Next recap is ask yourself the question, am I going to live a 10? Yes or no? There's so profound clarity in that. Make the decision. I'm going to go after my 10. Put the action steps, the habits that Cory mentions in place. And the final thought that just really profoundly impacted me, everyone is making a ripple effect. That profound truth, I don't think I've ever heard that before. And the reality is, if you're a 5 and you're living at a 5, you are making a 5 ripple effect, and you're impacting the ripple around you is a 5. And if it's an 8 or a 9 or a 10 or a 2, just understand. And if you look in the mirror and understand that you are living a 2, you're impacting your home, your community, the people around you at a 2. If you're living at an 8, and I'm asking you to recognize what that is. Who do I want to be? Cory, you said that so perfectly. Who do I want to be? And what number do I want my ripple effect to be? Cory, thank you. Great stuff, man. I look forward to chatting more soon.
Yeah, David, this was great. Thanks again for having me on.
So you just listened to this episode. Now, join us in being addicted to betterment. Please subscribe to the show, share with your friends, tag us, and please take a moment, leave a review. Yeah, we do want your stars, but we really want the feedback.